Now on that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour, they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road, and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Authentic Italian spaghetti and meatballs at Aunt Sandy's and Uncle Frank's. Fresh sloppy joes on some toasted buns at JoJo's. Homemade banana pet pudding at my parents'. I associate each of these meals with people in my life, and just the thought of them can transport me back to some of the best times with my family. Gathered around tables, strong Texas accents telling a story from years gone by, followed by roaring laughter. And the smell of these meals, it's like I'm reliving those memories. So it probably comes as no surprise that the sense of smell is closely linked with memory in our brains. Many studies have found a connection between odors and powerful memories. Scientists believe that smell and memory are so closely linked because the anatomy of the brain allows olfactory signals to get to the limbic system very quickly. They say the memories associated with smells tend to be older and thought about less often, meaning the recollection is so very vivid when it happens. Dr. Teresa White, professor and chair in the Department of Psychology at Le Moyne College in Syracuse, New York, says, "People often do say that the sense of smell conjures up memories so well that they feel as if they were experiencing the event again. Smelling grandma's pasta sauce makes them feel as if they were back in her home, enjoying a good meal." One commentary on the book of Luke says that throughout the book, Jesus is either going to a meal, at a meal, or coming from a meal. This vivifies the humanity of Jesus even more for us. In Luke, he's feeding 5,000 at Bethsaida. He's accepting the hospitality of Mary and Martha. He's eating with Zacchaeus in his home. He's at the Passover. And even here in this passage today. But before we get to the breaking of bread, we first walk with Jesus and two of his disciples, Cleopas and an unnamed disciple. Some believe that the unnamed disciple might even be Mary, who could have been Cleopas's wife. As it is written, these are characters with whom we as readers are not as familiar as the other disciples, but the grief that they are experiencing is palpable. They can't help but process as they are walking to another place. Maybe they needed to go to Emmaus for business or to see family, or maybe they just needed to get out of town as they encountered unspeakable grief. They couldn't make sense of all that had happened. As they walk with this unknown man along the road, Cleopas says, "But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel." It would seem that this confirms just how confused all of the disciples were about the death of Jesus still. Even after Jesus told of his death before his crucifixion, they couldn't hear it. All they could hope for was a Messiah that would come and make things better, make things right. And to them, as human beings in the land of empire, that meant power over. That meant a physical reckoning. That meant even an overthrow of those who were exercising such horrible power over the oppressed. And our hindsight bias might lead us to say, why didn't they get it? But isn't that still the way the world works today? Even many parts of Christianity still believe this is how it's supposed to work, that we are supposed to unite with empire. White Christian nationalism has a hold on this country. And apart from that, productivity culture tells us that we are worthless if we do not succeed. And so this is all intertwined with our faith. We are not that far from Cleopas, as we still sometimes hope that Jesus would be the one to redeem America in the way we want it to be redeemed, of course. But Jesus keeps reminding us that he is found at the table. The disciples' eyes were opened here because Jesus was most fully represented here. Breaking bread together was what Jesus wanted for his disciples. He wanted them to remember him, not only for the sacrifice of his body and the pouring out of his blood. He wanted them to remember him for his friendship and the beautiful community that is formed at the table. The table that is open to all. The table that is for being fed physically, spiritually, emotionally. Although we don't come to the communion table together on this Sunday, I can recall some sacred moments that I have had with you all at many tables during my time here at Wilshire. The sacred moments of intinction at Christmas Eve and Maundy Thursday services. Some intimate Vespers services together. And maybe one of my favorites is when we gathered at the table at youth camp last summer. Grade by grade, our students come to the table on the last night of camp, and they are fed with encouragement from Darren and the body and blood of Christ. This beautiful tradition reminding them every year that they are never alone. Because of the generations that stretch back, on the body of the body of Christ, those who have taken communion before them, before us. And one of the most formative books for me, Life of the Beloved, Henry Nouwen compares us to Jesus and the bread. We are taken, blessed, broken, and given. These action words can be spoken over who we are in our lives. In the first, another word for taken is chosen. Nouwen says, the greatest spiritual battle begins and never ends with the reclaiming of our chosenness. Long before any human being saw us, we are seen by God's loving eyes. Long before anyone heard us cry or laugh, we are heard by our God who is all ears for us. And long before any person spoke to us in the world, we are spoken to by the voice of eternal love. You are chosen, taken by Jesus exactly as you are. Listen to that first voice who always calls you the beloved. And blessed. The blessings that we give to each other are expressions of the blessing that rests on us from all eternity. It is the deepest affirmation of your true self. It is not enough to be chosen. We also need an ongoing blessing that allows us to hear in an ever new way that we belong to a loving God who will never leave us alone, but will remind us always that we are guided by love in every step of our lives. This love guides us, sustains us, and in the deepest way possible blesses us and calls us to a deep desire to bless others. Broken. Nouwen says, our brokenness is truly ours, nobody else's. Our brokenness is as unique as our chosenness and our blessedness. The way we are broken is as much an expression of our individuality as the way we are taken and blessed. The deep truth is that our human suffering need not be an obstacle to the joy and peace we so desire, but can become instead the means to it. The great secret of the spiritual life, the life of the beloved children of God, is that everything we live, be it gladness or sadness, joy or pain, health or illness, can all be part of the journey toward the full realization of our humanity. This is not to say that everything is meant to be happy and that you are meant to just smile through the hardest moments and traumas of your life. But one of the only truths that I can be sure of is that God is with you through it all. That though these broken pieces are not ordained by God, God can still use them. God does still speak belovedness over us in all our unique burdens and brokenness. And finally, given. True joy, happiness, and inner peace comes from the giving of ourselves to others. A happy life is a life for others, and as the beloved ones, our greatest fulfillment lies in becoming bread for the world, Nouwen says. So as you come to most fully know that you are beloved, that you are chosen, blessed, and broken, then it is your own turn to tell the world the same. Because we are surrounded by people who are desperate for compassion, for water to soothe their thirst, for bread to feed their hunger. So this is who we are called to be. I think it's no wonder that there was this wild surge of people learning how to make bread at the beginning of the pandemic. Did any of you learn while you're there? I'll raise my hand. Jesus wanted his disciples to remember him with every smell of the bread that they broke together. It was so deeply biological to who they were as human beings. In this moment, after the walk to Emmaus, the disciples suddenly realize who Jesus was. And from the Last Supper onward, this is what Jesus wanted them to remember him by. Remember me. Even if they didn't have the scientific terminology for the olfactory signals and the limbic systems, this much they knew to be true. When they smelled bread, they remembered Jesus. And they remembered who he called them to be in the world. To have an open table, to build community at that table, to denounce the world's way of power, and instead live in the way of love, of sacrifice, of humility. Wilshire, I believe in the ways that you are intentional to have an open table to all. I see how you denounce the way of power over and instead embrace the way of power to and power with. You live in the way of love, of sacrifice, of humility. And I'm thankful to play a small part in your story. And I look forward to seeing how you continue to live out these truths in many days to come. Amen.